Hello and welcome to ATARC's webinar series. Today, we will hear insights from state and local government topic experts on the best practices for developing a data governance strategy in today's hybrid world. My name is Kirsten Patton. I'm the Working Group Program Manager here at ATARC, and I have the pleasure of moderating today's webinar. ATARC stands for the Advanced Technology Academic Research Center, and we are a nonprofit that facilitates collaboration between government, industry, and academia in order to accelerate technology modernization initiatives. We provide ongoing opportunities for cross-agency collaboration through on-site interaction, learning, and market research. I would like to welcome all of our attendees joining us, and a special thanks to the Cloudera team. Before we begin, I just want to remind you to answer all of the poll questions as we go along to ensure that you receive your CPE credit. Now, I would like if our panelists would please come on camera and unmute yourselves. We're going to begin with introductions. So please tell us a little bit about who you are, what agency you're with, and anything else you'd like to share with our audience up top today. And we'll begin with Subi, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Subi Muniyasamy. I am the Chief Technology Officer for Department of Human Services, Maryland. Currently, I am overseeing a big Herculean project called MD Think. The Think stands for Total Human Services Integrated Network. We are modernizing all our human services programs such as child support, child welfare, adult services, and the integrated eligibility solution, which determines eligibility for cash, SNAP, and Medicaid programs. So this is a 5-year project, and we are into the 4th year, and we are almost in the 5th year right now. So our goal is to finish up all these things by June of 2022. Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. And I'd like to hear from Dr. Kellen next.
Thank you. I'm Vince Kellen. I'm the CIO here at UC San Diego, and I oversee technology broadly, specifically the research mission, academic mission, and to some extent our health mission as well. Been heavily involved in all sorts of data governance and data use issues, especially related to our COVID response here at UC San Diego, which has been quite challenging and interesting from a data governance standpoint.
Thank you. Let's hear from Brian Kelly next.
Good afternoon, Brian Kelly. I'm the Chief Technology Officer for the Ohio Turnpike and Infrastructure Commission, where I'm working on our future transportation technology on the road. I have over 31 years of experience as a state and local government CIO and CTO. Looking forward to contributing on the panel.
Excellent, thank you. And then Brian Hagan.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. Brian Hagan here. I'm a senior solutions engineer at Cloudera, and I support state and local governments along with higher education for Cloudera. A little bit of background, I've been in the software engineering space for over 20 years, and primarily in open source systems relating to, let's say, data flow and business analytics, which really ties nicely into governance. So I'm happy to be part of the panel today. Thanks.
Fantastic. Thank you all. Let's go ahead and post our first poll question to get our audience warmed up. So poll question number 1, please answer if you'd like to get your CPE credit. Is your data in the cloud, on-prem, hybrid, or multi-cloud? So we want to hear from you all. Please let us know the status of the cloud at your agency or organization. And kicking us off with question number 1, I want to hear from Vince first on this. Vince, what are the best practices for developing a data governance strategy? Can you please share a little bit about your experience with that?
Yeah, my experience has been, I hate to say this, a best practice is to apply some of the basic principles of governance, but understand you have to customize it very carefully for your organization, agency, and both the technology and projects you've got, but also any of the organizational and or political implications of it. So here at UC in the California system, I tell people when I came here at UC, I entered the Garden of Eden of governance. There's a committee on every tree. So we're very governance rich. So we've had to tailor a governance approach that involves the stakeholders in kind of a nuanced way. But the basic best practices and principles that we have here are to certainly involve, get the stakeholders involved, but more importantly, do it in a way that you enable community learning and community dialogue. Because part of the problem with data governance is the things that everybody needs to know tends to get pretty steep and pretty difficult. And it's sometimes hard to run a good governance meeting unless there's requisite knowledge in all the participants. So we've had to establish communities of practice that can share knowledge about data to the governance committees as well as to the stakeholders as part of it. So if I had to take two takeaways on best practices, is tailor the approach carefully for your context, and then pay very close attention to the evolution of education that has to occur to all participants who are engaged in governance.
That's fantastic. And can you share a little bit more about the community of practice, how you went about standing that up and how you operate?
Yeah, the community of practice, we established topical communities of practice related to different domains, whether it be research data, whether it be finance data, whether it be HR and employee data. And we brought in members of the business and other units into that governance, oftentimes pretty low in the organization, but also we offered the opportunity higher as well. And we got those going along with our governance, and they became very vibrant watering holes where people would want to come and answer questions about data, understand the relationships. Then when we enter governance, governance is aware that all these communities of practice are out there and sharing information and knowledge. So governance feels less obligated to have to tackle some of those harder technical or definitional issues. They're happy to either amend it to a work group or let the communities of practice sort through issues. And that's been very helpful.
That's fantastic. Thank you for sharing that with us.
And one other thing is we appointed a community of practice leader, and her whole mission in life is to keep these communities going and vibrant and successful.
Yeah, that's great. Important job. I'm sure it's pretty difficult at times, but that's fantastic. All right, so Subi, then can you please speak to how is the data governance strategy shaping your decision-making and policies where you're at?
Yes, absolutely. As Dr. Vince alluded, like setting up the data governance with the right people in place is very important. And at Department of Human Services, we established some kind of data governance, and that data governance team really provides some kind of data. What is the real data needs to be extracted from where? It's very important because the source of truth has to be certain level. People has to have some faith on the data, right? So that is the type of data we will be drawing from the right source, and then this properly vetted and validated by a team. Then it will be handed over to the business team to make the right decisions. The business team has to have good level of faith or the confidence on the data. For example, here we are drawing data from our system, especially with respect to the data collection, whatever we did for the child welfare, child support, as well as the integrity eligibility solution. So all those data is going to be like a source for our policy making and decisions. For example, while we are doing this exercise, I can give you one example. One of the example is we found like how this data has been used by various workers to serve the citizens. We found there is a densely populated area. The service is not very high, because of the lot of applications. And for the low population area, the worker is kind of having some kind of like a time to really process additional cases. So that data tells us exactly, like, okay, instead of like going with the jurisdiction wise processing the cases to provide the benefit to the citizens, why can't we just do the assignment across the state? So that is one of the decision made by our business to clear the backlog and provide the citizen the benefit in a very high speed, because especially with the last pandemic type of situation, whoever applied for the benefit, we want to really provide a benefit in a right time. So this kind of data, whatever we pulled out of the system, really helped to making that kind of decision. The another example I can give is there is a opioid or the drug usage. What is the population using the drugs in which area? That kind of data we are in the process of mining and collecting some kind of information on that. That way, moving forward, we will able to make a decision of like, okay, which area we need to have a focus from the government perspective, so that that doctors in that area can make some kind of informed decision. Okay, this is the type of people coming into the system and what kind of facility they have to make it ready to serve those kind of population. So this is another thing. The third example is we are heavily working on the 2Gen or the second generation approach. In the government sector, like there is a parents got the benefit and then the next generation also in the benefit. We are trying to doing some kind of analysis and trying to set some policies and decision-making process of why that kind of situation arises. What needs to be done in the government structure and policies to really help those population out. So these are some of the examples I gave, which is really become a very handy and is very important to make the decision to help serve the citizens of this country. So that is how we use this decision making using the data and setting the policies.
That's great. Thank you for sharing those examples with us. And I want to encourage the audience, if you want any of our panelists to expand upon the things that they've been sharing, please drop your questions in the chat and we'll be happy to elaborate further. But I appreciate the response to that question. And then Brian Kelly, could you please speak to what are the pitfalls that agencies may want to avoid as they look to evolve their policies and processes in relation to data security?
Well, two things that I think are important. One is that policies, continually need to be updated on a frequent basis, given the advances in technology and our adoption of technology and where we're storing and accessing data. So frequent review of policies, and then also review of the processes and making sure both the policies and the processes are in alignment with one another. Also, many of our legacy systems, the security for those systems was based upon the person, not the role. And today it's important to leverage role-based security. Many people within their company or their organization, their government, change roles over the course of their career. And so by having role-based security, you're ensuring that a person currently only has access to what they should have based on their role. If you're leveraging security based upon the person, then there's the opportunity that as responsibilities change over time, they may have access to data that they no longer should appropriately have access to based upon their current role and responsibility.
And do you ever receive, any pushback on that? Is there any reason why these people may want to have access to that data? Does it make their jobs like easier in some way, or is it just, something that needs to be refreshed every time a person jumps from position to position?
It's something that needs to be refreshed and looked at every time a person changes position. That responsibility falls both upon the business unit and both upon the technology department as well, to be looking at that and carefully reviewing the access that a particular person has.
Thank you for sharing that. We do have one audience question that came through. So this, I'm assuming for anyone on the panel, go ahead and feel free to answer if you'd like. Are there any new innovative cybersecurity measures like code lock being taken place as a result of SolarWinds attack, for instance? Feel free to jump on in if you would like to respond to that.
Yeah, I can jump onto that. Yes, like in Maryland, especially the project what we are running, yes, we have taken like a lot of measures, not because of the solar winds, but whatever we build, because of we put all our data into the cloud, we are very, very particular and specific about our cybersecurity. So, like 100% of the Department of Human Service data is going to be in the cloud. I saw your percentage of how many people having data in the hybrid cloud and on-premise. Only 6% of the people are in the cloud, at least with the voting, whatever you demonstrated. But here we have taken all sort of measure to make sure like we have all kind of high watermark controls in place to put some of the PII information, FTA information, as well as the bank card, whatever, the HIPAA. All those things we already taken care in a right fashion, and also we are providing some kind of access instead of like a data like a flowing from left to right. What we are doing is we are just doing some kind of access privilege, as Brian mentioned, to the external agency to come here and do the work and get out, rather than we are shipping the data. That way, the data transfer or that data going in the pipeline, we are trying to reduce as much as possible to mitigate this kind of like the ransomware attacks.
Thank you. Anyone else before we continue on? Okay, so.
No, yeah, the only thing I would add is cybersecurity is a complex, difficult piece. And while there might be measures that reflect new practices coming in, for us, it's many layers. And as we move into zero trust, that lends to itself a whole nother set of measures. And then, of course, there's always an element of cybersecurity related to insider threat and the various things that can happen there. So I think, from my standpoint, the evolving nature of the cybersecurity actions we take will generate evolving metrics around it. And I think that's going to happen and increase over time.
And one thing maybe that I'll add from a technology perspective, and implementing, and that's kind of where I'm going to be focusing a lot of my answers, is so you want to protect against, you want to prepare for cyber attacks, right? So one of the things that you want to ensure that you have as part of your platform is a really well or a valuable auditing system, right? And perhaps an auditing system that may have alerting associated with that, right? So either you're going to catch it while it's happening through your audit, or you'll at least be able to understand what happened to that data through an auditing system and a provenance record.
Great, thank you guys for sharing those insights. Another audience question I thought was interesting. This person pointed out from the poll that we had when we first started out, 60% of the attendees reported hybrid is their current platform. So would any of our panelists like to elaborate on why you think that hybrid seems to be the top choice versus picking one cloud provider or keeping all of the resources on-prem?
I'll start. Based upon some of the customers that I'm working with, right? At the state level, let's say, and they're supporting multiple agencies. And as they want to bring on new customers, some of those agencies, a lot of times they kind of run independently, and then they come to a centralized IT infrastructure at certain points. And to serve those customers, some of those agencies might already be in the cloud. And so to serve them, they need to adapt and have a system that would allow them to interoperate like that. So I'm seeing that type of interplay among the agencies and the top of the state.
Makes
You know,
sense.
additionally, in state and local government, you know, we are latecomers to the cloud, and still understanding and how we can leverage the cloud. And certainly there are advantages to the cloud. There are also disadvantages. So for some applications, they're well suited for the cloud. Others are better left on premise, at least right now, until you know, that technology matures. Judy Garland, the famous actress, was quoted as saying, "Beyond every cloud is another cloud," and that's certainly true.
I love that. So another attendee says, FYI, some of us are hybrid now, but moving more to the cloud. So perhaps we could see more cloud in the future as we progress in this area. Yeah, I think for sure. Definitely.
Definitely.
Well,
Yeah.
and I'll jump in because we're very aggressive on the cloud here, certainly at UC San Diego, but hybrid will be with us forever. There's some software that just does not function appropriately in the cloud. Some applications you have are such that it just doesn't make sense to move to the cloud. There's certain forms of technology, especially voice and telephony and video, that where east-west movement is far better than north-south up and to and from the cloud. So I think in a steady state future, we'll be, you know, more or less hybrid. Some places might be 90% cloud, some places might be only 40% cloud, but everybody's going to have some measure of both.
Is that just
I
based on,
agree.
okay, is that based on where the technology is at today, or is that?
I think the two issues I would say would be, one, technical, meaning the applications that are running just, it doesn't make great sense to go. And then the other reason might be legal contractual. There might be very strong legal contractual reasons for a given workload that it would be much, much more expensive or harder to do in the cloud than it would be leaving it where it is on premise. A lot of the legal contracts and terms, while getting better for government, in many cases for corporate partners in this, might not be suitable. So for any of us who have to deal with corporate partners, the cloud might not be an appropriate answer based on contracting and terms and conditions, liabilities, and things like that.
Are there like security reasons primarily, you think?
Well, most of it is related to cybersecurity, in that cloud providers are toxic to absorbing any risk related to anything close to a cyber breach. And so most of the cloud providers have very little liability that they take on that. And for corporate partners, that becomes an issue. That's what's in the government sector, but being in the government sector, we do with corporate clients quite a bit, and sometimes it's not going to work.
And I think what this, you know, what I'm hearing here, right, and what is clear is that as part, and what Dr. Kellen was mentioning earlier about setting up the policies, right, and as states come on, like Brian said, late, we have to incorporate the cloud into, you know, the development of these governance policies. It has to be a part. There has to be some discussion moving forward, whether or not you're going to move there or not. But you have to lay it out. What are, you know, the objectives and the risks, and what you're willing to accept.
Yeah, in Maryland, I can just give one of my perspective. Actually, like while we are debating this, whether all the data can go into cloud or we want to take a hybrid approach, you know, we did kind of a lot of research and we came up with this solution of building a very great security wall in the cloud so that the data can be secure. A lot of audience, especially a lot of our stakeholders, are like too much worried about the data privacy and security. So that is their key reasoning not to approve things going to cloud, number one. Number two is the technology. Some of the thing is, if you're really seeing it, all this cloud got evolved only in the last 10 years or so. You know, like every year, every month there are some new technology and a new type of activities are going on. I hope we made a strong decision. Yes, let us make sure we are building a right security layer in the cloud before putting the data. We just went a very phased and step-by-step approach in the past 4 years to move all the data into cloud. The number one is the technology. Number two is we need to have some level of associated budget also in the government structure. Unless you have a clear plan in place while you are moving something, there may be some unknowns which may work, which may not work. So these are the type of activities needs to be taken into consideration before moving the data from on-premise to cloud. It depends on the type of databases they are using, how they are storing the data. These are all some of the unknowns people has to deal with that. So I would strongly recommend anybody moving it, please do a POC and then continue to move.
Thank you for the additional insights. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to pop up poll question number 2 real quick and weigh in on how confident are you with your agency's data governance strategy at this time. So go ahead and rate the confidence level. Poll number 2 should be up any second now. There we go. Go ahead and answer that if you'd like your CPE credit at the end of this. All right, so moving on to the next question, Subi, this one is for you as well. What is the best way to approach collecting, managing, storing, and cataloging government data, and also knowing what data to purge?
Yeah, it's a great point. I think this entire discussion is eluded around this particular type of topic. Fundamentally, the data collection for every agencies, whether it's a public or private sectors, a lot of years they have been started collecting it. Every data has to be associated with some policy. Whether what is this type of data we are collecting, where are we using this, why are we using this, how long we want to retain this data. So that level of policy needs to be associated with every data, because this data discussion becomes a very prominent discussion in the past, I would say 8 to 10 years. Prior to that, we don't talk about this data and analytics, all those things. What we all talk is only how to collect the data and provide the benefit. As part of this process, what we did here, we got a very good opportunity to do a total modernization of all the programs. We started integrating the data governance into the system development lifecycle. So that is how we have to educate to make sure all the people involved in this process, either is a developer, means like a Java developer, or anybody who is really doing the work, the database administrator, or the business. So everybody is properly tied or integrated into this development process. That way, that is the only way. What are the various data we are collecting, why we are collecting. If you're really seeing it, past 20 years back, we collected some data, that data is no more relevant. So those kind of data, we no need to collect it. So if we exactly know if we are collecting one data, what is the purpose and where we are going to use, how long it is going to stick around. So my suggestion, my point of view here is we need to integrate. This is a cultural change within an organization. This is not an IT issue or a business alone issue. It's like a total cultural shift the organization has to move towards to make this data governance and data collection, management, and storing process very stable. We got a good opportunity in the past 3-4 years. We are trying our level best to integrate all these people into this process. Still, we are building, we are in the focusing of building some kind of a center of excellence. I would say it's other part of a community of practice. We call this as a center of excellence who focuses mainly on the data collection and how the data has to be structured and formatted, those level of details. So I would strongly recommend, anybody is watching this show, they have to really make sure this data governance has to be a part of the integral part and the integration within the software development lifecycle. So that is the only way we can overcome this data governance best practices, as well as how we are going to store data and use it for later usage.
And Brian, Kelly, on a similar note, and feel free to answer the same question as well, but do you feel that, you at your agency or like what you've been seeing in the industry, people are being good stewards of their data? And maybe you can elaborate upon that in terms of how do you measure that? What are the kinds of things that you are looking for when it comes to data governance?
Well, I think we're all challenged in that regard. Our data is dispersing. As we discussed today, it's on premise, it's in the cloud, it's on personal devices, and it's in personal clouds of employees as well. And while we'd like to think that our policies are being adhered to and followed, our data is splattering, throughout the internet and throughout our personal and work lives. That's the reality. The other problem is most organizations, whether it be state and local government, private sector, are no longer backing up data. And then what do I mean by that? Well, 25, 30 years ago, we did physical offline backups of data to tape. And that secured the backup so that it could be restored in the event of a disaster or a cyber attack. Today, most are replicating their data, and it's online. So in certain cyber attacks, such as ransomware, your primary data center, secondary data center, and your online backups, that data could all be compromised and encrypted. And you could be put in a position where you cannot restore it because you do not have a separate offline backup. And so, it's very important today for us to understand where our data is, how it's being backed up, how it's being replicated, where it's being stored. One thing that I think is really interesting, if you ask all of us on this panel today to identify the exact location as to where all of our data is, we would be challenged to give you the exact location. We might be able to say it's in the Azure cloud in Virginia, but be able to give you the street address and the city where that data is located in all the different clouds and places, I think we'd all be challenged. So I think there's a lot that we really need to pay more attention to and to think about, and to make sure that the reality of our data governance strategy is real and not just a policy on a piece of paper that we'd like to think everybody's adhering to.
So with that, where do you feel that this disconnect is coming from, and what in a perfect world should happen in order to improve or avoid this lack of understanding?
Well, I think we just need to have the same view towards stewardship of data that we had 30 years ago, and to be a custodian of it, a protector of it, a guardian of it, and to not necessarily rely upon third parties to be that guardian or trustee of our data. At the end of the day, it's data that we are trustees of, we are responsible for, and we have to answer to the public, to our clients, and to our customers where that data is and how it's being secured.
So would you say that you agree then with Subi's point about a cultural change, cultural shift when it comes to data governance?
Oh, absolutely. But I think that's really challenged because in our personal lives, let's be honest, with social media and personal clouds, we're storing our data indiscriminately with little regard to the security of it. And we take that same culture from our personal lives into the workplace. So it is in the workplace, refocusing that culture, right, and re-educating our employees and users.
Yeah, I'll pile on that. We've gotten very blasé on data management over the years. So I've been telling a lot of my constituents that it's a good way to think about data is to think about it as toxic waste. It can have some disastrous effects if it's stored improperly. And so I keep saying, and by the way, email is like the, this huge sinking hole of massive data that's very toxic and very hard to secure. And when people start to shift their thinking about data around the toxicity of it, potentially, it does help change the culture. But I think the culture has shifted over the years to be very blasé.
Very good point.
Yeah, for sure. So Vince, what would you say some of the challenges agencies have encountered in trying to secure and govern their data?
Well, I think the growth of the data, the heterogeneity of organizational structure and organization response to issues, and then the heterogeneity of applications. So I would say general growth of complexity in all dimensions, be it organizational or technical, is one of it. But another area of overlooking that I think Subi mentioned briefly that is worth looking, and that's making sure that all policies and procedures have an expiration date and a review date. Because oftentimes we look at a policy and we go, oh gosh, this was written in a prior era. It was written so long ago. It is so 2012. And we're only 10 years later. And so you often have to make sure you go review these policies. And so forcing that attention to that so that your policies and your practices stay up with facts on the ground, the reality on the ground. And sometimes people on the ground begin to know that. They know that the policy and the procedure is completely not in touch to reality on the ground. And so we got to get better at policing that process.
And then the age-old challenge along with that is just time and budget, right? Because at the state level, as that's changing, you're already slammed and focused on just running the state, for example, right? Or your agency, and then to set aside, you're trying to do new initiatives, like we've been talking a lot about that. So yeah, keeping up with that is and making it an importance, I think, is just a challenge in itself.
Yeah, great points. We have an audience question that just came through. So any of the panelists, please chime in if you'd like to respond. But this person is asking if any of our panelists run multi-cloud implementations. And if so, what's been the biggest challenge integrating those services? Would any of our panelists like to take that?
Yeah, I can take that. Thank you. Yes, the way we are running the thing is we are having AWS Cloud as well as the Salesforce platform. So the Salesforce platform, we built a kind of like the CRM solution to this contact center or call center support services. We built that solution in the Salesforce Cloud. But whenever people are calling and they are entering the data, we will be able to connect directly into the AWS Cloud with our master data management and quickly pull the data back into the Salesforce to show like exactly who that person is. That way, we will be able to completely provide the details to the contact center worker very quickly. So this is the type of integration we did. Yes, there are some few challenges, but it is not a very bad or very high technical challenge. We have to have a little bit of focus to really operate that or connect the two cloud areas, and we are able to do it within like a few days. So it's not a big technical nightmare here. Like a lot of other agencies in the public and private sectors are doing like this, and we are also able to do it in the Maryland.
Great. Well, thank you.
Yeah, I'll jump in a little bit. I think the multi-cloud, I'm a big fan of the multi-cloud strategy as a way to avoid excessive lock-in and risk with a single provider. And so the challenge in doing so is making sure you choose your software and general platforms in a way that can be multi-cloud. And if you do that, I agree with Subi, it's more of a mechanical issue to move things around and move things between clouds. But I think maintaining a credible threat of defection to the cloud providers is important because I think we learned from 2009, nothing is too big to fail. And so while we might think that the big three are here forever and nothing could possibly go wrong, the reality is that something will at some point. And so making sure your architecture is multi-cloud enabled is probably the harder part, but it's not insurmountable at all. And I think once done, it can work pretty well.
Yeah, one more quick comment I want to make on this subject, because the multi-cloud, as Dr. Vince mentioned, we can build a technology with a completely like a cloud agnostic, like we can just bring the technology from outside and put it in one cloud, which can be transformed or like transferred to another cloud very quickly. But that comes up with some kind of like a budget and cost behind that. So as long as you are aware of exactly what you want to achieve and what is really good for your agency, it will work out. Doesn't matter.
Thank you guys for those responses. We're gonna pop up our third and final poll question. And just as a reminder, please ensure you answer this. For your CPE credit, in your opinion, what is the most important benefit of a data governance strategy? So those options include operational efficiency, enhanced collaboration, data cleanliness, all of the above or others. So please take a second for that for your CPE credit. And moving on then, Brian Hagan, if you could please speak to how have you addressed the need to govern and secure data while also making it available for insight, both within the agency and to other agencies who might need to work with it? So I know you're coming from the industry side, but what has your experience been with that?
Yeah, so this kind of ties into a lot of what we've talked about already. So I think that's great. And I look at it from a platform approach. That's kind of where I've been for quite a while. And I like to start with like what Brian Kelly was saying earlier as authorization policies, right? And if you're working with multiple agencies or within the state, you're talking about multiple people. So having something that's centralized helps, right? And so you have the types of authorization. So Brian mentioned RBAC, role-based security, access controls, and that's great, right? That's one option that folks are using. Another thing that that I'm trying to educate folks about is ABAC, or attribute-based access controls, where you can essentially tag entities of data. So no matter if folks do leave their roles, this is tagged as, let's say, PII, and that tag can cascade along, to any downstream or upstream entity. So authorization is key. And, another thing, again, you're talking about multiple agencies or within a state. And we've already talked about this, right? So we might need to move data from the cloud. Most of the time you're moving it to the cloud, or you might even be moving the processing to the cloud. So for example, I have customers, as I mentioned, where as they're bringing on new customers within the state, they already have data in the cloud. So they have to make a decision. Are they going to move the processing there, right? And most likely that's what that agency wants. And this ties into governance, right? So the policy has to span that. And so we have to think about that as we're developing or doing the reviews of the policies. And something that helps with that in let's say data sharing is a data catalog concept, right? So that's going to allow you to let's say maybe even create data sets for the different agencies or groups within the state. They need to be able to know what's there. So a lot of times, and this is a place as you develop a governance policy that you can search for entities or provide the descriptions of what the entities are in a centralized location. And then also, as Subi mentioned earlier, when you're bringing data in, you need to be able to understand where that data came from across its life cycle, right? So lineage and provenance is important as I'm bringing on and working with new customers within a state. quick and easy ways to understand what a schema would be, right? What's the makeup of this data, and is there any personally identifiable information that we might need to classify or tag? So setting up a data catalog would help that, in a governance situation, help you, work across the state, with new agencies. And for example, I'm working with the state now where they're going through a modernization phase, which is pretty common, and that happens, every few years. And we're talking to them about, the different stages of their life cycle, and how, some of these things in terms of authorization, the hybrid approach, and the data catalog is going to help them achieve the modernization.
So then you might answer this question similarly too, but like how for state agencies or health coordinator data be interoperable in order to support data and collaboration, and the value that this creates?
Yeah, there's definitely some similarities there. There are a couple key things that I would pick up on there again, starting with your centralized authorization and governance, having that available, is just helpful, right? So if you can build that into your policies and your governance strategy, you're going to eliminate some complexity of having to integrate that across the other systems that you're using, for example. Another key would be to have the options, right? You always want to have as many options as you can. So we've talked about on-prem, hybrid, multi-cloud, having those as options. Along with that, what that's going to provide to you is, if you have a platform that is on-prem and multi-cloud, you have the same tooling, the same look and feel, the same usability across those environments. And so that's going to lower the barrier to, adoption, or the architects or the business stewards that are, having to move and work across those different environments. That will be helpful there, allow them to focus on their job. Another key is to think about the multiple different data types and formats that are coming in, right? So you might have flat files, XML files, JSON. There's all kinds of data formats, even binary formats. So the ability to have a platform that will handle those across the different types of workloads is important. And then, the ability to be able to convert between those, right? You might have to build some of that into the governance policy. What happens if I have data like this and I need it like that? How do we handle that? And what is our policy around that? So being able to quickly, be agile in that approach. And so I had a customer last year when COVID happened, and they were hospital, and they needed to quickly be able to get some new data feeds, which is FHIR, which is a type of protocol for healthcare organizations. And we were able to quickly, within a week's time, be able to bring in this new data, be able to transform that from the format we got it into a format that they needed, right? And it was quick and it was easy. And so that allowed, them to operate their business, and then to actually, really help the community as well quickly.
Very cool. Would any of our panelists like to weigh in before we move on? Subi, were you going to say something?
Yes, I would like to have one comment on the secure data, the data security. So in the experience what we had here, like sometimes we secure our data within our cloud or on-premise, doesn't matter. But while we are doing the data sharing with our partnering agency or the other states, for whatever reason is because of the nature of the business, you may require to share the data. But the here problem is, we do not know how much security the other end having on your data. So you yourself alone secured is not good enough to say your data is secure. The minute your data goes out, they do not have enough security in place, your data is still going to be vulnerable. So that is something which we are taken into consideration, and we are more focused on, instead of data sharing agreements and all those things, we are more focused on doing something data access agreement. Like the data is there with our system. In case you are most welcome to come and access the data with the proper governance. You are the right person to access it. You provide some kind of good role-based access, which we all discussed, and then they can come here and cook it and then get out. So that is the type of mode we are going. Already the federal agencies did like a few things with respect to this kind of concept, and the state also moving towards this concept. So this is one of the key area which we want to make sure like our data is secured. Only everybody using our data is secure.
Thank you. And then real quickly, we had an audience follow-up question. I'm not exactly sure which one they're following up from. I think it's the multi-cloud implementations question. But this person is asking if you could please advise on some of the interaction softwares being used by your organizations. So does any of our panelists have any of that they would like to share?
I can quickly share with the experience what we have here is, like there are some couple of software. One of the software, what is the MuleSoft is one of the good integration software, which can be used to integrate like multi-cloud. Like especially with the Salesforce and the AWS cloud, whatever we are doing. So that is one of the prominent product.
Okay, great. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, well, we are almost out of time. We have less than 10 minutes left. So if you have any other questions, please send them in now so we can get them answered. Otherwise, I would love to go around and hear from each of our panelists on, final thoughts based on this discussion. What are some key takeaways or anything else you'd like to share with our audience before we close out for today? But this has been such a great session. Thank you all for your insights. Let's start with Dr. Kellen, please.
The one thing that's been sort of on my mind about the data governance has been, the certainly here in higher education, we're dealing with so what I call this political angle inside our four walls and with our state agencies that we depend upon. And there's a lot of murky ground in this. So policies often get interpreted in ways that might not be the best or the most appropriate, but have some wiggle room. And so data governance becomes this place then where we try to adjudicate these matters. And what we've noticed in the last few years is they haven't decreased. So the sort of the data governance kerfuffle continues to grow around it. And also, as also noted as a political animal, warfare is often merely ontological. Over the right to define data use and data classification. And so having good governance processes that allow the community to come to common terms on that is extremely important. So lately, I've been spending more time thinking about the sort of governance and organizational dynamics dimension of governance.
Thank you, Dr. Kellen. Brian, Kelly, what would your takeaway from this conversation be?
One thing I think we all need to think about is there is a cost to data governance. You can either make that investment upfront proactively, or we can withhold from making that investment until at some point we've got to go back and clean it all up. And so it's also important to invest in the tools that we can give to our users to be able to comply with policies, to be able to properly manage data. And we need to make that investment in those tools and then train our employees on the use of those tools so that they can properly store, maintain, retain data in the way that our data governance policies stipulate.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. And then over to Subi for your final thoughts, key takeaway.
Yes. My key takeaway is, here, this data governance, there are a lot of good stuff in the internet in the market, but we need to have a very good executive sponsor or buy-in to implement this data governance. So without that, it becomes really hard to implement anything. So that is the first thing. The second thing is, collect the data once from a resident and then make use of it as much as possible. Even if I go to the doctor's office, they gave me like a 7 different document, 7 different forms. I got to pull up the same information on all the forms. We do not want to do anything like this. In Maryland, we are going to undertake something called common customer intake. Once the people come and apply for the benefit, we know how the data to be collected, structure, and try to evaluate for all those things. The third thing I want to mention is, once we have that first 2 things done, as part of the development life cycle, we definitely want to integrate the data governance as part of the process. So that is my wish, and that is my takeaway from this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And then Brian Hagan, will have you wrap us up with your final thoughts and key takeaway.
Yeah, thank you. And this is might be interesting as I'm a technologist in my practice, but I'm gonna kind of agree and go on to the point what Dr. Kellen said, that governance starts with people. It's more of a people issue than it is technology. So, and you have to really get the stakeholders together. And that goes to what Subi said, which is, with that executive sponsorship, that's going to really enable anyone like our panelists here to be able to have the authority to bring the people together and then decide what those policies are. And that's where the hard work really is, because once you have that, then you can come to somebody like me and I can help you implement those policies with technology. So the real takeaway is it's people first, right? And policy first, and then the technology.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. We actually have a bonus poll though that we're going to pop up right before we go. I think it has something to do with the CPE credit. So we'll pop that up real quick. Would you like your CPE credit or certificate emailed to you? Please answer yes or no. And with that, I would like to thank our partners again at Cloudera, our awesome panelists, for taking the time out of their day to come speak with us. And thank you all at home for joining us, and your audience questions were fantastic. So we really hope to see you at ATARC's next event, which is a 2-day Zero Trust virtual summit starting tomorrow. You can go register for that on our website now. And yeah, before logging off, just remember to fill out the poll question. Otherwise, thanks again, and I look forward to the next one.